men. So how would you judge the leadership style?
Thank you very much.
And I have George Ngaire.
Thank you for having me, Fred.
What a week. What a week. Who in the world ever thought that we were ever going to see this generation that normally does its thing on social media literally force the government's hand, forces the president to pull back the bill, storms parliament, almost kills members of parliament. There's an ambulance that was seen leaving parliament that had, members of parliament, and it was stoned and the MPs were stoned. Who would have ever thought that these kids would? David, did you see this coming? At least to the magnitude we saw it.
Well, Fred, let me say that, as you have started by saying, that has been a week. And I think we underestimated the power of Gen Z.
Yes.
And I give it kudos to Gen Z.
Yes.
It is actually a script which was written,
yes,
and the prayers, they prayed it very well. To the extent we have been hearing about there can be a change in Kenya, but this is the time that we can see there is a real change that
yes,
can come about.
Yes.
Well, I think one of the things that I see is I loved the way the Gen Z, they actually did what they did.
Yes.
In the first place, there is one thing that was very clear. And these are the three things which we saw, and they came out strongly, and I think that is what really made them to win in such a way.
Yes.
One, they are actually people from one tribe alone.
Yes.
They don't care about whether I come from Mount Kenya, I come from Kakamega, I come from where. For them, their tribe is Kenya. And we are getting to a place, and I think if we get to be Kenyans, and we fight our battles as Kenyans, we are bound to win the battles. And they fought as Kenyans.
Yes.
They did not care. In fact, they never asked one another, where do you come from?
Which party do you support?
Yes, they did not. The other thing is actually they are tribeless. They are also faceless. Really, you don't know who is it that you are going even to call for anything. If, for example, you want to come and intimidate them, who do you call to intimidate? Because the government tried all the things, actually abducting several people, but at the end of the day, the guys were so organized to the extent they could be able still to move. I saw like the way they were controlling one another. And it is the power of the media. They used the power of the media in such a big way, such that that's why we are saying, I think these guys are in another level. They are in a level whereby the politicians, I think the politicians are going even to learn from here. And that's why sometimes you realize they were trying to get to Gen Z, but they are really not really for them, because one of the things, their agenda was one, is actually to liberate Kenya. So the way they have done it is something that nobody would have expected it would go that way. In fact, even the leaders themselves, they were in a challenge whereby they could not see. That's why they are even asking, even today, who is this person who is behind the team? Because they cannot see. So this is actually something, it is still a puzzle which really need to be filled. For many of us, we don't know exactly what happened. This is one thing that even today we are talking about it, but we cannot really say who are these people and what is it. But they are Kenyan, and they are Kenyan who are frustrated, and they are feeling that their government is letting them down. So whatever they did, for the president, I can see, president had actually 2 press conferences. And the first press conference was that night when things happened, which I would say it was uncalled for and it was unnecessary. In fact, what he did is actually to make these people actually even to be more agitated. Because when he comes and he talks about terrorism and he talks about goons and all these things, it was actually uncalled for that particular time. What he needed to do is actually first of all to sober up and then maybe call the conference, the press conference, like the press conference he called the following day, whereby actually he said, I have seen Kenyans don't have nothing to do with this thing, and they don't want anything to do with this bill. That is exactly what he needed to have done. because he ought to have led the mood on the ground.
When you're weak, the 48 laws of power. When you're weak, you act strong.
Yeah.
When you're strong, you act weak.
Yes.
When he had his wall completely against the wall, his back completely against the wall, he made the press conference saying, you know, we have this, we have this. Now, when he had gained the strength, in this sense, he had fulfilled, maybe to the politicians, his act to show I have total control of parliament. And it has now come back to me. I am the one who can decide now this thing. He played the Moi script very well. Ngaira.
You know, Fred, I'm a very proud Kenyan today. This must be the best week of my life now, because at least in this generation and in my lifetime, I am getting to see citizens holding a government into account, and with the government having no scapegoat. They can't place this one on anybody. They've been asked very valid questions about the things that they are supposed to address, and that's why even the young men, when you listen to them, and I've been listening online, some of the long debates they've been having online, and they are saying, we don't want meetings. The issues are clear. We've said, reject the bill. Why should we have a press conference and have a convention about that? But the issue is very clear. And for a long time, and based on how based on the politics of this country, the governments that have been there since independence, every time those governments faced serious critical issues of national importance, they always went back to an scapegoat. That there are people who want to overthrow this government, there are people from this community versus want to take down, this is our power, it becomes a tribal ethnic, yet it's just a sober issue. You've said the cost of living is very high. How about we do away with West-Asian government? It's a straightforward thing. They begin telling you, you know, these people want to grab power. You know, they fail to address the specific issue because there's always a fallback. Now, for the first time in the history of our country, we have leaders, we have a generation of individuals. And Fred, maybe today on this station, I can openly declare that the hustler nation is dead. There's a new generation, it's called Gen Z, is now a political base with clear interests, and whoever connects with this base might have an extremely upper hand even in the future elections that would ever have. Because this president has lost his own political base, and the tragedy of it all is his own deputy president completely distancing himself from what the president and his, you know, sycophants, you know, the close allies that he has, the kind of demeanor they're portraying. I think the deputy president had even the best demeanor. He started off by saying, I'm a father, and I have kids who are also Gen Zs. And we didn't have to get to this particular position where people had to die to address a minor issue that could have been addressed by even a certain department in government that we pay billions of shillings to tell the president that it's not working. We wouldn't have gotten here. But obviously, the president and maybe those who work for him probably didn't pay attention, or maybe they underestimated the magnanimity, the size of resistance that this bill was, particularly this bill was facing. Fred, you've mentioned Mount Kenya, but you must remember that it's almost 35 counties that were on the streets. To mobilize 35 counties to be on the streets. I have been in an operation where we were mobilizing people just for Uhuru Park. And Fred, and they were supposed to come from 85 wards. And we had to consult transporters like David to hand us in 10, 20 minibuses so that you bring in 500 people a person to get them from 85 wards and be able to at least have 50,000, 100,000 people at Uhuru Park is millions of shillings. And so for anybody to tell me that you can, with that scale, to be able to say, put a budget on it, it must be hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not a billion, to just do that. I doubt if that can be fully funded, even though there's a margin of error. There's always people who want to run into situations where they take advantage of such issues. That is normal. But Fred, the country is on the right path because the leaders can be held accountable. On this newspaper here, they are saying behind the Gen Z's rise is an opposition vacuum. Something that I've been saying all the time, that we've lacked somebody that would have checked this government because everybody depended on the opposition and largely on ODM and even more importantly on Raila Odinga to be the person that could have checked government and maybe even take people on the street to hold this government together. This or any other government to account. But Fred, what these Gen Zs did, not even Raila or ODM has ever achieved it. The moment I saw those young people getting into parliament, usually in other countries is at that point when the military comes in. At that point. That is how Blaise Compaoré left in Burkina Faso. The moment the young men got into parliament and they set parliament on fire. And Fred, this parliament, a section of it was on fire. You understand? I don't know how that played out. Maybe they weighed the issues and saw that is something that is manageable. And I think that's why even the president didn't address the nation immediately. He had to check because there was also a timeline for the legal demonstrations because you can protest up to around 6. I think they were monitoring that. And by the time we got to 6 p.m., Fred, things had sort of calmed down and maybe they thought we don't really need to go to an extreme situation. So I'm very proud of these young people and I think the country is now at a place where now we can hold our leaders into account. And maybe this is now the time when we can go back to the issues that I have seen some of them listed here in terms of checking cabinet and cutting on issues of wastage in public government and doing lifestyle audits on leaders. And this is a process that all of us, all 52 million Kenyans, I think Kenya National Bureau of Statistics puts us at 54 million Kenyans, must be very proud of this moment. It's unfortunate that it had to come with the loss of lives, but now we are in the right phase. Where
the environment has been, it's very, very conducive for what you can call positive change.
Correct. Yes.
Where we entrench a system whereby members of parliament know they can now not just do anything without consulting the people who sent them to parliament. David.
Correct. Actually, the thing is, right now I have seen quite a number of members of parliament. They are actually going and asking for apology. Because it is actually a tight thing. Because this guy, they were actually set even to bring them down. And I think that is even in their mind. And I think with what is happening right now, Fred, it is very possible. The only thing I would say is for Gen Z, also they get to know we are doing this project and we are moving with it. Once we have done this, now we start taking another one. Now it is vigilance. I think what they really need is to be very vigilant so that they will be able now, right now they can make a change on anything that we want to do. Because let me tell you, the government, yesterday I looked at the majority, Kimani Ichung'wah. And when he was talking, one of the things that he is saying, now they are saying, yenyewe, we went wrong in terms of the governance and all these things. So it is the right time. If the Gen Z, they hit the right places right now, it is possible that the change is going to come. And I can tell you, this government right now, I can still tell you, it has not woken up to the reality. Because the thing is, and I was looking at this newspaper, one of the things is that they knew there would be resistance, but they were being pushed towards this by the IMF. And I think we talked about IMF the other time here, and we said it is like the government is being led by people outside of this country, which is something which is very bad, because these people don't understand what happens to Kenyans. For them, they want to see revenue. They want to see targets being met. But how are they going to be met? And the other time, you remember, we talked about a company that came to Kenya from Dubai. And right now, they have lost it 100%. It is because they do not understand what happens with Kenyans.
Is there a possibility? IMF has put pressure on the government so much, yet because the government had put pen to paper, they cannot renege from this. But to create or open an avenue whereby now they can tell IMF, what you were telling us cannot work. Once the demonstrations have gone, they continue passing the bill to satisfy what IMF wants them to do, knowing very well that the people will rebel and resist so that they can get an open door to tell IMF now, we cannot do what you've said because you've seen what the people have done.
Okay. You know, Fred, on the IMF, actually the IMF has already pronounced itself on this issue. That's why they gave a statement to
wastage and all that.
Wastage of art. He said, ask your government. Because, Fred, you've seen, and I have seen, and those of us who are keen and have been checking social media and mainstream media, leaders and political leaders who before they came into office had nothing, working with bundles of money publicly and dishing out publicly in Harambee, somebody that cannot even show you a matchstick that he produces. You understand? Somebody whose salary is only source of income, because they are not, most of them are not businessmen of repute that we can say as a product on a supermarket shelf. You know, that one can tell you, I have this Brookside milk and, you know, I sell 1 billion of them. You understand? He can show you where he gets his billion. And you have these leaders who just the other day were nobodies, now they're working with stacks of money. And this money could not have come anywhere else but from the taxpayers' box. You understand? And so the problem has been, Fred, and not just in Kenya but in Africa. It has always been and starts and ends with leadership. Fred, I've said here a dozen times that Kenyans were not stupid when they went to the constitution 2010 to elect a brand new constitution that came by blood, you know, from the Rubias and the Matibas and the struggles of the Shikukus that took us many years and people paid their lives. They could have lived comfortable lives. They didn't have to. But because of the tough regimes that we had those particular days, they decided to sacrifice their lives. Matiba was a billionaire by the time he was coming into government. But he died almost a poor man. Most of his properties were taken out. It was for political persecution. You understand? And so that's what ended us up, and that's how we ended up with a brand new constitution, and the constitution that listened and looked out for everybody. That's why we came up with devolution. And they were very clear that this is how we want to govern this country going forward for the benefit of anybody. So that, Fred, nobody in this country should ever say, we are poor because Ngaira, who is a Luya, became president. Or Fred, who is from Oranga, became president. Everybody gets his fair share of the national cake. And all of us, and even went to an extent of creating a local structure, which is the county government, so that now in my home county, Fred, we can sit and discuss about health, about education, without having to say Mtukuf rice. That was how we decided this government to run. But governments that have come in year after that, unfortunately, we haven't fully succeeded in enshrining that devolution, because then, Fred, if we had devolution, we wouldn't be having the thousands and hundreds of thousands of young men that are on the street. The other day we were just discussing with somebody else on a different show, and I was saying, when you see this kind of young men on the streets, what does that tell you? And everybody has his own opinion. But somebody said something very noble. He said it means they do this because they do not have anything else to do. If that young man on top of a police truck was a banker, he would be at work today. Then the streets will be empty, isn't it? If that young man was a lawyer, he would be in court today. They are here on the streets because they don't have an alternative. And however way you might look at it, Fred, any leader must be worried that there are young people that are willing to be that daring to go all the way into power. You can imagine, Fred, the state of mind of the young man who was sitting on a rectangular seat. The amount of risks is taken to get to that point. And he's not a madman. He's not a madman. It's because he's reached at the very end that he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind what he faces after that. That should worry any nation. So this president, as the president of the Republic of Kenya, I have always said as a patriot, Fred, that I would never wish for this country to collapse. What I'm asking is there a possibility that the card was played the way it was played so that you can deal with IMF?
Can I say that?
Yes.
Let me tell you, some opportunities arise when things happen.
Yes.
This might not have been the script.
Yes.
But I think it is a script that can help Kenya to get out of these things. In the sense that today, if IMF comes and they demand some few things, Kenya and even the presidency and even the people who are budgeting, they can actually face the IMF. And that is what we say, it is actually the right time. It is helping Kenya, and they must look at it as it is something that can help Kenya to liberate Kenya from all the policies which had been cited and all those things. They tell them, look, if we go this direction, we'll have no country. Because you have seen what has happened. And these young people, they are not going to stop. If they say no to something, it is going to be such a great thing that we cannot be able to afford to continue moving that direction when the people, there is such kind of a resistance. So I think one of the things, it has placed Kenya in a very advantageous point. And if the leaders can seize the moment and they see exactly what they can be able to do, they can liberate themselves from all those forces. So it is something maybe in terms of the government, and there could be possibilities anyway.
Yeah.
There could be possibilities, but I think we are at that point whereby now you can speak something which is against and people would listen. So it is something which is positive in the sense that one of the things, you know, because there was a prediction, by the way. The IMF had predicted there is going to be resistance.
Yes. To the bill.
Yeah, to
Yes.
the bill.
Yes.
Actually, they knew 100%. And that's why, you know what they were saying? They wanted to make Kenya just to be like USA. They wanted it to be like any other country. But they did not actually realize that Kenya is not at that point. Because you see, like now, when they come and talk about the telecom, in terms of the significant economic presence,
Yes.
it makes sense to some country, but it may not make sense in the Kenyan market.
Yes.
And that is where we are saying, right now the government, it should be looking at what Gen Z has done as one of the things that is very positive, that it can help them to have a voice, even with any person who is outside there. And therefore, that's why I know we are in that, and we are asking, was it a script? Was it done that way to liberate us? Was it not done that way? But what I can say, the bottom line, an advantage has come.
Yes.
Kenya can now talk.
They
And
can
when-
tell the IMF, we cannot fulfill this
Yes.
because, well, you've seen what happened.
Correct, correct.
If we continue that direction, we will never pay your loan.
Correct. That is the thing.
Yes.
And therefore, that's why we are saying this week, I would say, it has been a week of freedom. We may actually look at it, and we are sorry, and we condole with the families who lost their dear ones. It is a painful moment for them. This one, their death, the death of these people, will also liberate Kenya. I believe even during the time of Mau Mau, so many people lost their life, but we actually got our independence, and some of these things, they happened. And I have listened to some girls, to some young men, and it got to a point whereby they said, in fact, they started referring that our forefathers, they fought for this country, and some of them lost their lives. And when you get the young people say, I am ready to fight for my country, now we are able to speak to those forces, and we tell them, guys, we have a country to learn. And I think that is actually one of the statements. And I think the statement that the president said in the second placer was actually a good one. He said he leads a country, but also he leads people. And therefore, you cannot kill the people so that you can lead a country. You need the people if you are to be a good leader. And I think this is exactly where we are. And it's a revolution. It is a new revolution which would be able to liberate it if we follow this thing to the letter.
You see, do you see, I know right now in the country, there was a lot of animosity against the president, and there still is. But by playing the card he played, what are the chances that he could have won now quite a number of hearts?
A very few chance that he could have won a number of us because of the number of issues that are at play. And David has quite indicated that it's not just a finance bill. There's a whole bunch of issues that Kenyans have, which have been listed, and I've seen online, I've seen on mainstream media, that Kenyans still have issues with. And that agitation is really, finance bill could have been just a trigger to this debate. Fred, the biggest issue that we have is the opulence that we have in government. Corruption and wastage of public funds. Fred, that one, unless it's addressed, nothing can change. Because you have people wearing, you know, I saw another villager of mine saying that there are some government officials who are putting on an acre of land on their waists. You understand? To mean that the value of the belt
and the trousers.
Yeah, because
Yes, in the watch.
because if your belt is like $5,000,
Yes.
it means that's almost 700,000 shillings.
Yes.
700,000 in my home. You can have half an acre in an urban area, and in the village there you can actually get an acre, you know, deep in the villages there.
Yes.
So for as long as that is not addressed promptly, and this president does not cut down public expenditure, this is going to remain so, because most of the people that came out, except those that come from maybe the president's inner circle and maybe his region, who might have a reason to compromise. The other people do not have a reason to compromise because they do not benefit from him. They are not, people that benefit from him directly might not feel what these people are saying. But if you're a father, Fred, and you have kids that are grown and they're supposed to go to college and you're paying 200, 300,000 shillings now to go to university to be able to educate your child, you can imagine what it means at this particular time. You have almost a million shillings bill of an education bill, Fred, for you to pay. It should bother you whether or not this president is from your village, because you're a father, and the same way he's making money and taking care of his family, you also pray you can do the same for your family, not unless you're a stupid father. And if there's somebody that is actually stopping you from actually being able to achieve that, you should be bothered about what is at play. And so this president, unless he addressed that, Fred, this president today as it stands, is probably the least popular president in the region, as it stands today. And what happened this week was a checkmate on his leadership. I can imagine at that moment when the young men broke into the Senate, and you are a global leader watching on TV, and you're now trying to analyze what it means. For
That was an attempted coup.
It was.
Yeah,
it was a civilian coup.
Yeah, that was an attempted coup.
Yeah.
And if you read some of the things that are being said within some of the circles,
yes,
when the demonstration started, when the middle class children went in, a lot of things were straight from the heart. Yes. You know, majority of people were there for the bill.
Yeah.
Now, what we have right now, let me give you an example. I was coming from Morang on Tuesday, and I can tell you, matatus, people can say this thing, part of it was not sponsored, but there was an aspect that was sponsored.
True.
And by very well-oiled individuals from wherever. I don't know whether they are from Central or I don't know. But all the matatus that were coming from that side going to the CBD had demonstrators. The demonstrators were not paying. The matatus had been paid for to ferry people into the CBD. This is not something I'm telling you that I saw. I mean, I was told. This is something I saw. And when you speak to the matatu drivers, when the road was... So there was two aspects of this demonstration.
And I think, Fred, when you...
Hold on, let me land. There was two aspects of this demonstration. Yes. There were the middle class people, my daughters. Yeah. My daughter went for the demonstration. Yeah. People who went out there, their sole objective is we are not going to have this bill. True. We don't want it at all. Then there were paid goons who are still in the streets today, whose agenda was completely different. So there were two different agendas playing. One of them, regime change. The other one, kill the finance bill. And since you've been on social media, on those platforms,
yes,
you see again the two debates going on. They're saying, why should we go back to why should we be in the streets? What we wanted has been taken out.
Correct.
So why are we going still? So there are two things. Politicians, like we had said the last time, politicians being politicians, played their hands, regime change. But the Gen Z, the real Gen Z, who went up, who probably started the whole thing, just wanted the bill out. So there is regime change, and there is take care of the standard of living.
Fred, that's true, but also now, and maybe additionally, you can now look at it from the context, which is why I agree with you. You can look at it from the context of the statement that was given by the Deputy President.
Yes.
It was a political statement.
Yes, it was.
It was a political statement. He's a major player in the Mount Kenya region. It's an area that is currently dissatisfied. And Fred, not just the politicians, the public as well. And these are the people who voted for this president overwhelmingly. 3.4 million people voted for this president, which is almost 40+% of the vote that he got. A significant portion of his base. And when you go into that particular region, there is discontent in how the government has been run. And then obviously then you would have such opportunists, as you may call them, who now then want to take the political advantage of that to be able to mobilize people. It is very true that now the government of President William Ruto is split right in between. It's not a rumor anymore. And one of the regions that have massive interest, you know, Central Kenya has massive interest in the government of William Ruto, unlike my own region, we do not have much interest in this government because 80-90% of them didn't vote for this government. So they're just hoping that they can live and survive until when they can get another opportunity to challenge the government. So it's very obvious that the not just central, the whole Mount Kenya region have an issue with this particular president, and even the person who the biggest face of the region in the government has already made it clear that people haven't been listened to, and he has continuously addressed some of the emerging issues that they have in that particular region. So you wouldn't rule out a clear, you wouldn't...
Actually, if you listen to the statement, if you read the statement by the NIS director,
Yes.
what the NIS director was alluding to or was saying without saying it is like it is the deputy president who's actually behind this. Because he says the reason why he's bitter is because his people from his community within the NIS who he had placed there, who were...
And we did not really think that they can. But he is also, from where I sit, he is also a very crafty man. In the sense that, let me tell you, you cannot, when they realize that things, you know, some of the people are taking advantage of the whole scenario, in the sense that you want the president also to be unpopular. So what do? Is actually to take advantage where people were actually having a very good thing they were pursuing, you actually bring in goons. And that is what we have seen. Actually, have you even realized, even in Mombasa, these young Gen Z people, they actually were doing a very clean demonstration. And you know, within a short time, goons start coming and to lob them, even lobbying the Gen Zs. You know what we are saying here, and I will say one thing, and I have asked that question for like 3 days. Why is it that there was such a turmoil in Githurai? It is a question mark. And that's why we are saying there is a lot of interference right now as people want actually to bring the government down. You see the way we were saying it was actually like a coup.
Yes, it was an attempted coup.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
You know, actually some of these guys, they wanted to make sure that coup is realized. And that's why you are saying, initially, the Gen Z may not have been funded. But there are several people who came. They are not with Gen Zs. But because you see in a commotion, you will never know who is a Gen Z, who is not a Gen Z. So Gen Z are still now fighting. And that's why it is good some of them have come to a stop. And they have said, we wanted this, it has come our way fast. And they say it even going to State House. There is no need for us to go to the State House right now because what we were looking for, we have already gotten it. But there are some people who are pushing, and it is actually, I can say, 100%, we have dirty politicians who actually are trying to do whatever they can, also to discount, not even the government, to discount the president, which is actually for them, and that's why George is saying, a divided house cannot stand. So here, we are actually fighting with several forces.
Yes.
Forces that you can see and unforeseen forces. These unforeseen forces is the forces of the politicians. Let me say, I am in this business of transport. I cannot actually be able to fuel my car during this economy and actually ferry people without the assistance of deep pockets.
Somebody paid.
Yeah, someone has already paid.
Yes.
And this is why we are saying there are people who have actually, you know, they try to get into what Gen Z are doing.
Yes.
But Gen Z are not interested in their political, political things. And therefore they are not actually, so they are coming in to disrupt the good thing for Gen Z because they are finding it is like Gen Z has actually now gone to a place whereby they have rested a bit and they really wanted it to get to that level whereby there could be a total, revolution, which has not happened. And that's why you can see when the deputy president, and I can say he was out of order completely, and I looked at him and I realized this man, he keeps on saying that he knows something. But right now, what he did, I cannot see the wisdom that he had. You know, let me tell you, Fred, if my CEO goes and make a statement in the organization that I am in,
You can't.
without the authority from CEO
Yes.
for me to go and address the staff, if it was a pertinent issue,
Yes.
without the authority
Of the-
from my CEO,
Yes.
I cannot go there to purport to tell my staff another thing.
Yes.
This man, he is just, you know, that moment I heard that he is giving a press, I just held my head, I crossed my ears, and I realized this man is actually a troubled man. And he is a man who is not following the protocol and every other thing. You cannot go and say that the president was misled. The president was not getting information. Surely, even you, Fred, you could read the mood of the country.
Yes.
And if, even in terms of this bill.
Let's just say he's a brilliant politician who knew when to strike.
No, he's not brilliant.
Because look at it from this perspective.
Yeah.
The president has been fighting you.
Yes.
He has sent people from your backyard to fight, and they have fought you. They have frustrated you. What he simply did is that he took Ruto's script during President Kenyatta's time, and he played it on him after the president had spoken. And you note, he actually was cutting down the president while praising him.
Very true.
Because he's saying, I know President Ruto cannot do this. There was I know him very well. He was misled. What is he saying? This guy does not have the ability to make the right decisions.
Exactly, and he's out of touch.
Yeah, he's completely out of touch with the people.
You know, Fred, they say in politics, Fred, they say in politics that timing is very important.
Yes.
Because that's how even when you are alluding that last time we hear about countries like Madagascar and many other African countries, their characters who became presidents, not because they were in the pipeline to becoming president.
Timing.
But the timing of when they came in was very, very, very tactical, and they were able to build careers out of that. And I think President William Ruto is where the late President Kibaki was when he lost the referendum in 2005. Because that president had just been elected into office with 63% of the vote, which is the highest vote any president has ever got. So he's the most popularly elected president ever. But 2 years later, he had lost the referendum and the government looked defeated, which is where this president is. And so for his own deputy to come at that moment when you are at your lowest and to be able to validate the issues that the people are raising
Against you. And he's supposed to be helping.
He's supposed to be helping. This was the worst time for Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua to speak.
Yeah.
But you know, he came up and said the president, literally said the president is out of touch with what is happening.
Yes.
And even went ahead to attack a very critical state institutions, the NIS. Fred, he didn't just say about the briefing of the president, he also said that part of the things that the NSI, this is the Deputy President's official statement, which he did it in writing. He said some of the players within the institutions of NIS are actually even planning to abduct and attack the members of parliament that voted no. This is a statement from a deputy head of state. You can almost believe him because of the scale of his office and access to information. And he completely, what you'd call, bastardized that institution, which is very critical. And so for him to do that, for sure, as you say, it was his political brilliance on his side, because then he's looking at his interest. This president, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, understands what we have already said. That there's a very famous book, David, you might be knowing it, called Who Moved My Cheese? You know, that when you're still not aware that things have changed. This Deputy President has continuously said that he has listened to the ground.
To the ground.
And he feels that things have changed.
The cheese has moved.
The cheese has moved in the region. And so he knows the best place to be is in that particular region, because as much as he's a deputy president, but he's a startup politician. He hasn't been here for more than even 10 years. You know, so for him, he has a long career. He can have a career for the next 20 years. He's about 55, 56. So he can be around for the next 20 years to even begin to reach the age of some of the national players that we have. So from where he sits, there's a political opportunity for him to build his career. And when you listen to what happened at Limuru 3, And the statements that were actually some of the statements that were said there is that they said going into the next election, we made a terrible mistake being tied into one party, and that in future political negotiations we will do it within our institutions. We need to have our own political party, our own members of parliament, and one of the members of parliament said that even though we've had 3 presidents, we want that any other government, and even though we've already had 3 presidents, and we might not even want to have a candidate, but any political negotiation that we do in any near future must be under a political party where we can speak without being politically arm twisted. You understand? And so they might push for a candidate to run against this president in 2027 to just consolidate the political numbers that are necessary then to come on the table and say, look, we have 30, 40 members of parliament, we have 6 senators or 10 senators, and this is what is at stake, because 10 senators in a senate of 47 senators is a critical number to pass a critical issue. And so they realized that then being in a certain political party and going forward, Jeremiah Kioni said, if we do not plan ourselves, we might be out of government for the next 100 years. And so to be able to curtail that, then it's important that then they're able to reconvene and be on one political platform. And Deputy President Gachagua is very alert and aware to that. And there was no better time to come in and actually indicated that. What he did, Fred, he actually washed his hands off what has happened.
He just said,
I was not part of this. The president was not informed. You didn't have to kill our kids. And I've warned you for a long time. He actually said 3 months. For the last 3 months, I've been saying that you should listen to the people. So this president at this point, the deputy president at this point is an angel. You understand? And he has deserted this president.
Which is actually, let me tell you, Fred, this is a very bad thing, especially when you are conjoined. In terms of presidency, there are some things that the deputy president cannot go and tell people. Because, you see, we are even not only losing trust on the government alone, but also we are losing trust on him. Because, let me ask you a question. What kind of development would we expect from those two kind of people? Whereby this is pulling toward this direction, and the other one is pulling toward this direction. President Ruto is a human being, just like you and me. Do you think that it is going to be very easy for him to sit on the same table?
In the cabinet, knowing this guy is literally cutting me down.
You see, the thing is, this guy, and I would say, and I say it without fearing, if the deputy president is not interested in this government, he can just resign. We go to vote again without him. Because let me tell you, it is out of order. Whether we call it being brilliant, it is out of order and lack of wisdom. And I think I would say to him, you know, the word of God says, if you lack wisdom, ask it from God. I will tell him to go and pray so that God can give him wisdom. Because I am telling you, you cannot come and you just remove your president. Unamtoa guo mbele ya watu. You are actually coming and just addressing him completely and saying that you are not in touch. You are actually telling your CEO, your boss, some few things.
You don't know what's happening in the company.
Yes, you are actually telling him like that. You know, it is a demeaning moment. And I think for me, I really say that the deputy president
was out of order. Now,
he may have done it.
If you look at some of the things that have been happening prior to this, I don't think anyone was surprised. He was already being ostracized and being left out in what you can call in government, where the CSS and people would talk to him anyhow, to a point where he comes and says that just because you are in a circle, that you cannot come and tell me, the deputy president, how I'm supposed to operate. I am the deputy president. Don't come and tell me what to do. I cannot take instructions from CSS. Those are some of the things he was saying. And he has been saying a number of things. I think that might have been, was it Sunday or Saturday? Or they were with Kalonzo Musyoka at the Senate.
Very true.
They were with, so and if you listen to his language, he was saying, this is our son, we are actually cousins. And we have decided we are not going to fight. We are going to look for friends. And he even says, when I was in South Africa, I also spoke to Raila Odinga.
Very true.
So he's already telling you where his camp is at now.
Fred, the deputy president, the vice president of Malawi who just passed on 2 weeks ago, the Saulo, whatever the second name, I keep forgetting it. Many people do not understand that he was actually the vice president of the former president. He was the vice president of Mozambique, and they fell out in the manner and style that this kind of presidency is facing. And then he moved into the opposition and became the vice president of Chakwera in his second term. And because politics in Malawi, just like in Kenya, is regional, you know, he came in from a region that is very populous and cemented the victory of Lazarus Chakwera to become president. And what happened this weekend, as you're alluding to, between the church session between the deputy president and Kalonzo Musyoka, before the deputy president spoke, there were people who spoke there. And those MPs actually said, you know, we have 5 million votes. If Kalonzo can bring his 2 or 3 million, we are at 8 million. You understand? And Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, if he's tactical, because I don't think the country is ready for another Mount Kenya presidency, but he's still a politician, and he's alluding to interest of the region, as they said at Limuru 3 and many other functions. They've said we are still Kenyans, we have a right to participate into politics, but we are going to do it tactfully. You understand? That could be a political tact that will be disastrous for this president in 2027. If, for example, there was to be a fallout between this president and then the deputy president...
There was to be. I thought there is.
There is, but you know, it is not
politics,
officially dead.
Yes.
You know, we are seeing signs of.
Yes.
But you still...
If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. It is a duck.
So, my friend, just very quickly, because that's a possibility and it happened in Malawi.
Yes.
And then he moves into for example, partners with their cousins, which is Kalonzo, and it's very true, because when you go to these areas of Kilimambogo all the way to Murang'a, there are areas where Kambas, I have a friend of mine is called Kilonzo, sorry. He comes from that Masinga, that area where Murang'a borders Machakos. And he's a Kamba who speaks fluent Kikuyu because he's grown at an area where they speak both languages. Almost like what happens in Kakamega, that area of Kwesero and Mumias. You can't tell between a Luo and a Luya. They speak both languages. That's why you see Wajakoya comfortably speaking Luo, because that's what happens. And so Deputy Gachagua is right, because then you have a ticket that already sits at 6 million with those two on the ballot. And you can imagine then what that means for the political calculations of the president, because then he has to look for an alternative base. Now where would he go to? Where would he come to? Western? Does he go to Coast? Does he go to Nyanza? Where there is no, it's a gamble. It's a clear gamble. And if you cannot have the 5 million votes from Mount Kenya and the 2 million from Ukambani, which is 7 million, and again the other 9 million, because Western then we're talking about 3-4 million, Nyanza have 3 million or so, the Luo-Kisii combination. The cost of 2 million is almost 9 million. If those two bases are not with you, then how do you become president? Because the constitution is very clear on how you become president. It throws the president into a serious issue. And if I was President William Ruto, I will not take it lightly, the kind of sentiments that this deputy president has shown, because of two things, Fred. The Mount Kenya regions has two big strengths, numbers and resources, which are critical in any campaign. Anybody with that one, you see where my people, for example, of Western regions have failed, is that we have numbers but we lack resources. So if we say we loosely want some 3 billion shillings to run a presidential campaign, and we need 100 people to give us 30 million, it's very hard. I was in a meeting when Davadi was running in 2013 with UDF. Remember that party?
Yes.
We went to the what you call the United Club Hotel just at the Nairobi University roundabout, David. You know that old hotel there? I was there in a function which was supposed to raise money for UDF at that particular time, and now Musalia had indicated that he's running, and they needed to raise some 100 million. They needed just 10 people that can give us 10 million so that we have 100 million for the launch. We couldn't raise 10 million. You understand? And me, being somebody that spent a lot of time at the Nairobi Stock Exchange, where I went 20 years ago when I first came into this town, I met there a guy called Benson Wairegi. He's been a long-time CEO of Britam.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
And he once told me how he mortgaged his only house because he had worked for a while and then bought a house, and how he mortgaged his house to get the money that he then invested in Britam many years ago. And that money now, Britam, which is a multi-billion shilling company, his stake there sits at maybe 5-10%, I don't know. But even if it's just 5% of a company that's worth a couple of billions, it tells you that he's a billionaire.
Yes.
Jim Nambaro of Diane Blair Bank, who also used to see, I used to go to Jirongo's office on Loiter Street. That building now is called Loiter. It used to be called Loiter House, but now I think it's Pension Towers or something like that. And every time I would bump into him in the lift. So one day I had to engage him. He gave me his email and stuff like that. When I went to check on him, I realized again he's a major shareholder in one of these NSC companies. And when we loosely packaged his shares in one of the companies, Britam included, he was sitting at 3-4 billion. He was sitting at 3-4 billion shillings. That is somebody then at lunchtime can give you 100 million, Fred. 10 of them will give you the billion that you need. So when Kenya comes in with very critical, two critical strengths, numbers and resources, which this president cannot downplay. It would downplay if it was the Western region where you say they have the numbers, but they might not have the resources to go across the country.
And the fact that if you looked at the demonstrations yesterday, Makueni,
Yes.
places where you never hear of demonstrations, Makueni, Machakos, there were demonstrations.
Marsabit.
And Marsabit.
Yes.
That should speak alarm bells to the current. I know in Nairobi, majority of the people, and Mombasa, majority of the people who are there now are goons. Because if you, what people are saying from Mombasa, the Gen Z went, demonstrated, lit candles, and they dispersed. Crooks came in the afternoon and they started robbing people.
Correct,
in fact, in Mombasa, the people who were throwing stones were crooks.
Sure.
They were robbing people, lobbing tear gas, and I mean, just crazy. In the CBD in Nairobi, if you looked at the people who are now demonstrating yesterday,
yes.
you could clearly tell the difference between the Gen Z we had seen before and these people. These are goons who had gotten into, supermarkets and they had stolen quite a number of things. Now that this bill is gone, I can see we have a number of people who've sent messages, including I see Angeline Olayo, who's saying working with constituents hand in hand is the answer, and be transparent to them because they are the ones who employed them. That's Angeline Olayo. Then Tirike Torome. This is a friend of mine, Tirike, a great sports person, great journalist. He says the choice of the analyst is top notch. And then we have Moses Muhakiki Stanley Muhubu. He says, let's stop fallacy of hasty generalization. I don't think Mount Kenya has an agenda on this government. It's a long post. Number 2, the Gen Z were on the streets against finance bill. These other stories of Ruto must go are not from Gen Z. It's a planned coup. And then we have the X-Space host were people in the X-Space hosts were people in Europe. The X-Space that was on social social media.
Yes.
He says these are people who are in Europe. I had one lady host speak very broken Kikuyu. I had only a lady host speak very broken Kikuyu in an attempt to assassinate with our suffering or associate, I guess. Then 3, the clergy should come out, especially Nairobi and Mount Kenya, should come out and apologize. They allowed the church to be used to wash money. They misled the people. Then number 4, it's either the president was misled or he has a heart harder than Pharaoh. Then I see Ruth Cliff, Pastor Ruth, you're saying kindly what happened to the NHIF? People are suffering. You guys will address that. Then Paum Shikiki, it says, and why don't you call for the resignation of the president? Let's be genuine. And then when Ruto meets with Raila, it's okay. When Gachagua follows suit and meets Raila, deputy, you fault it. Tuache ukabila. Kamba and Kikuyus are cousin. Their story is that the father of Kamba was hosted by Kikuyu and eventually married Kikuyu's daughter called Nyambura. That's why in Kamba you get names like Wambua, Mumbua, Siombua, all means from the rain. Nyambura means from the rain. These are some of the thoughts that have come through. So quite a number of people concerned about some of the things that are happening. So how maybe you can what next? Maybe you can talk to Pastor Ruth, NHIF.
Yes.
The other system, has it kicked in?
It's supposed to kick
1st of July.
Yes.
And even the president was meeting the minister, I think yesterday, must have been yesterday, with the Minister of Health and the officials from the Ministry of Health. And for the first time, I'm very proud that Dr. Patrick Amoth is now in the pipeline of being confirmed as the Director General of Medical Services. A position that he has served for 5 years, since 2019, just acting. You can imagine the humiliation and what it means. For somebody who has now is even now been confirmed as a World Health Organization, I don't know, Vice President for what, clearly a very credible guy, that most people may argue that is even way more qualified than even the CS herself. And for him to be put on a waiting lounge for that long, I think now we are getting there. Finally, he's getting some justice for a civil servant that appears to be very committed to his work. And Speaker Wetangula has forwarded his name for approval, which then I think when Parliament comes back after recess, I think July 28th or something like that, from August, that is one of the things that they're going to be working on. Because you need somebody who understands the history of the ministry and where you are coming from and where the gaps are. You know, Patrick Amoth is way more informed because he's a career civil servant. He's been there for almost 20 plus years, which is giving him institutional memory that maybe even the CS of Health might not be able to understand. And is a critical player in addressing the changes that are being done on NHIF because of...
Quite a number of people are suffering because you go to hospital, the system is not working.
It's not working.
You cannot do NHIF.
Because of how it had been structured and the issues that primarily NHIF was supposed to address initially, we are now living in a situation where we're also facing other challenges and the issues of terminal diseases and bad medical facilities in the country that then force people to go overseas for medical services, making it very expensive. So then it was actually prudent that you relook into how that structure was working. And that's why they've been able to split that institution into three. When you look at it, the way they've split it, it's in a very structured way because of the digital funding of it's been divided based on the kind of functions that they're supposed to play. There's what you call primary health care and how much can go into taking care of patients who are just walking into hospital to get basic medical services and leave, and then how then do we address those who are dealing with terminal diseases, and so they need extra funding to be able to address issues like those ones of cancer and other terminal diseases, and then also how then do we handle the issue of payments. Yes. So we're going to have, I think it's called a digital authority or something like that, an institution that will also play around to be able to ensure that we can be able to account on with the HIF and payments. You know, some of the scandals that have been is that we've been having what you call fake NHIF claims. You understand?
Yes.
By rogue hospitals, which then claim that these patients came here with their cards and this is what we've spent, which is not really true, but is actually just a collusion between those hospitals and corrupt officials in the NHIF. And so you have then the digital authority that specifically is able to handle the issue of payment so that they're able to verify that if a patient goes into hospital, particularly for terminal diseases, and is cleared on what now the new format of insurance, and a claim is to be made, there's also digital evidence that that person actually showed up in that particular hospital and was treated for that particular condition, so that at least we are able to counter the issue of fake claims. All these are efforts to be able to contain the gaps that were there in the NHIF. My challenge has always been is the governance issue now that we are addressing, is that then as you do that, the people in government might be doing it with their own personal motives, because maybe some of them own insurance companies, and this is their time to again parade their companies to be able to benefit from
just
this
crazy,
man.
man.
And that's like, Fred, I'm telling you, if there's one thing, the next phase of the battle, which we were just asking maybe to quickly address it, is you're saying, then what next?
What
now
next?
that the bill has gone home,
Yes.
is one of the things for me is just the issue of structure of government and wastage in public service. If we can hit that, then we'll be able to make good progress.
And maybe as I go to Pastor David, as we bring this to a close, the focus now needs to go to the county governments.
Very true.
Gen Z, maybe you should now focus within the county governments, hold the governors accountable.
Correct.
You remember there was one that bought a wheelbarrow for 100,000.
It is my dear governor.
I know. And there are others who have done crazy stuff. So let us, if we start holding the governors accountable, the same way we've held now this president accountable until we've gotten the government with its tail between its legs, we do it to the county governments. Trust you me, life will transform completely. Corruption will come to an end, and people will be able to experience a good life.
Well, thank you very much, Fred. One, I would say that there is a story about a rabbit and a tortoise. The rabbit, in all its estimation, knew that it was very fast, and therefore did not care much. And when we are told about the story, it went somewhere and slept, saying that the tortoise, even if he keeps on coming, he will not be able to get me. And the time he woke up, he realized that the tortoise was actually touching the
finish line.
The finish line.
Yes.
Now, what I would say is that the politicians, they must realize that we are in a different dispensation in terms of politics. Some of these things that the politicians are trying now to align themselves, when they are trying to do that, they need to realize that there is another revolution which is coming. And this is actually 53% of the people who will be voting in 2027
Are Gen Zs.
are Gen Zs. And therefore, if they do not really look at this segment,
Yes.
I can tell you they will come up with so many alignment.
Yes.
And the time they are coming with alignment, they will realize that the Gen Zs are touching the rope. So if there are some people, they really need to be very careful, and they talk to them and they bring them into their camps, is actually the Gen Zs. Because the way you are saying what next, in terms of them going to the leaders who are actually misusing the funds and bringing them out, at the end of the day, the Gen Zs will get tired and they will say, we need one of us. So we are in a very interesting moment whereby the surprises that we got this week, I am saying that we are going to get quite a number of surprises as we go forward. But the main thing, let the Gen Zs be very vigilant, the way you have said, in the county levels,
Yes.
in the government levels. Let's make sure, because Kenya does not lack in resources.
We have a
Kenya
lot of resources.
has a lot of resources.
Yes.
In fact, and I would say, let it go to the record, the bill 2024 was a wastage of time, because that money they were looking for, 346 billion,
It's available.
they can be able to get it even without going anywhere else.
And Fred, as you close, may I
Yes.
just make very quickly?
Yes.
All this will not happen unless we address the issue of IBC and the IBC reforms. We need to immediately reconstitute the IBC so that even if we want to do the mass recalling of members of parliament or hold the county governors, the governors and the county officials into account, you need then an institution that can be able to.
Because right
transition.
now, if
we don't have a functioning
we can't
IBC.
we can't even do by-elections.
We can't even
No,
do.
you
We
can't.
have even existing by-elections that
Yes.
are supposed to be conducted. They haven't
But
been
they
done.
can't
So I
have
think
them.
we should put a focus very quickly on the issue of reforming the IBC, and it should have a timeline. We should say maybe in the next 90 days, the IBC should be restructured. We have new commissioners so that then we can get into the phase of holding these leaders to account. I'll be doing it in Kakamega, starting with my governor and my rogue member of parliament in the name of Malulu Injendi. Thank you very much.
All right, we bring down the curtains on this show. let us be vigilant. At the same time, let us realize, like we have said on this show and has been said by you, that there were two agendas. The Gen Z wanted the bill gone. The bill is gone. Gen Z. Right now, majority of the people who are in the streets are goons. And they are robbing, they are looting. And we thank God that at least yesterday there was a presence that kept quite a number of people safe, the military presence in the streets. Let's hope that they are not used, and people, let's take care of our country. Let's continue praying. People can say all things about prayer, but prayer works. That's the reason why we are where we are. We did not, cross and fall into the pit. So let's continue keeping this country in prayers, and what needs to happen within the religious leaders, God himself is going to know how to do that, but they also know. Do have yourself a lovely morning. God bless you. Gentlemen, that was really good.